the previous videos, we learned how to construct a major scale using a specific pattern of half steps and whole steps, and also how to arrange all the resulting major scales on a diagram called the circle of fifths. In this video, we're going to work within the scale itself, identifying different notes using a system called solfege. Solfege is a system by which every note in the scale is assigned a particular syllable: do, re, mi, fa, so, la, and ti. In a C major scale, notice how the syllables line up with the pitch names. C is do, D is re, E is mi, and so on. When we get to the top, we repeat do because, as we've already talked about with the musical alphabet, it continues repeating forever in both directions. The history of solfege is fascinating if you're into that kind of thing. Without going too far in depth, it originated with an Italian composer in the early 11th century, Guido d'Arezzo. The system is based on a chant he wrote, in which the first note of each phrase began on the next note of the scale. By taking the initial sound of each word, we ended up with ut, re, mi, fa, so, and la. At that time, music was arranged in groups of 6 notes rather than the 7 we use for scales today, so this was fine. In the 1600s, a musicologist named Giovanni Battista suggested swapping ut for do after his own last name, and adding in C as a 7th scale degree after the final initials of Guido's song, Sancte Johannes. In the 19th century, music educator Sarah Glover suggested changing C to T so that each note would start with a different letter, and this practice persists in many English-speaking countries. That is how we came to the solfege scale widely used in music theory and ear training programs today, and also heard occasionally in other contexts like musical theater. There are 2 different approaches to solfege, and this is why I feel that this conversation belongs in a larger lesson about keys and key signatures. The first option is fixed do, which is used in many areas of Europe and Asia. In this system, the syllable do always refers to the pitch C, and the other syllables fall in order around it. This is why you will see certain works from European composers with a title like Mi mineur, meaning E minor. Notice also that this system did not adopt Sarah Glover's T. This is sometimes preferred in performance circles since it reinforces a sense of absolute pitch, or the ability to pull a note fairly correctly out of thin air. After enough time training that re is D, your body and mind will begin to remember how it feels and sounds. For theory and analysis, however, the other system is generally preferred, movable do. In this system, the syllables are based on the scale. No matter what key you are in, the first note of the scale will always be do. So in a C major scale, C is do. But if we move to a G major scale, G would become do. If we move to a B flat major scale, B flat would be do. Got it? This is helpful for theory because we aren't necessarily interested in what the exact pitch is, but more how each note is in relation to the notes around it. Movable do works well for this because I can say the syllables do, mi, so, and I will always be outlining a major arpeggio built on the first scale degree. You will sometimes hear me using a variety of solfege syllables in my videos, and sometimes they get altered. Just like notes on the page can be changed by adding a sharp or flat, solfege also allows us to adjust our syllables to match. Some of these syllables do not have corresponding lowered or raised versions because at that point they stop functioning in the context of the scale, and that is a key word because solfege is really only helpful in what is called functional harmony. This means that if we look at Western European or American music after the early 1900s, composers were not writing in a way that was based on the same relationship between notes, so solfege sort of stopped being useful. This is why I think solfege ties in well to key signatures. If you know that there are 3 sharps, and that means you're in the key of A major, you also know that you'll be using A as do, B as re, C sharp as mi, and so on. If you see 5 flats, and know that you're in the key of D flat major, you know that D flat is do, E flat is re, F is mi, etc. Solfege both supports our knowledge of keys and also renders it irrelevant sometimes. If you can hear a melody and discern that the pattern of notes is so, mi, fa, re, do, then you can notate that pattern in any key you want. Want to write it in B flat? You could use F, D, E flat, C, B flat. You could write it in G too, D, B, C, A, G. So knowing solfege helps you operate within a key and also assign things that you have heard to a key without necessarily needing to know exactly what it is. However, if you do want to practice hearing exactly what key it is, maybe it would be handy to practice your fixed do. Good luck, and I'll see you next time.